I'm in, shouldn't know that. We're in Volume 2, Part 2, Story 7, Frogs in the Palace. Um, it's obvious of what's going on, but let's see. A few days later, Moses and Aaron went to see the Pharaoh again. As soon as he saw him, he demanded that they work a miracle to prove the power of their God. Aaron once cast his rod in front of Pharaoh, and it became a serpent. And the king was impressed, but he was not willing to admit that this was a sign of the power of the Hebrews' God. Suspecting it was just magic, he called for his own magicians and ordered them to do the same trick. And they did. As soon as their rods hit the floor, they became snakes. Now there were several serpents crawling all over the place. For a moment it looked like Moses and Aaron had were nothing more than two smart magicians. But then a strange thing happened. Aaron's serpent went up to one of the other serpents and swallowed it. And then it came after the other until all it had swallowed all of them up. When at last when the last had disappeared, Aaron took the serpent by the tail, and it became a rod again. It was very mysterious. Again, Pharaoh was impressed, especially as his magicians looked very silly without their rods. But he hardened his heart and refused to do what Moses and Aaron wanted. The next day, the Pharaoh went down to the river for his morning bath. He found Moses and Aaron waiting for him on the bank. No doubt he was very much annoyed to see them again as soon and in such a place. When when Aaron began to call to him in a loud voice, he must have been very angry. But he stopped and listened. What was this old man saying? They were strange words from a Hebrew slave. Thus saith the Lord, in this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in mine hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall turn to blood. The man, this man must be mad, thought the Pharaoh. Does he think he can turn waters of the Nile into blood? But even as he spake, a dreadful smell came up from the river. Turning to see what was the matter, he noticed that the water turned a dull red color. Dead fish came to the surface, being washed up in the bank at his feet. It was a dreadful sight. Sickening, he turned and went into his house, while all the Egyptians dug around about the river for water to drink. But the Pharaoh let did the Pharaoh let Israel go? He did not. Instead, he called the magicians and ordered them to turn the water into blood. They did, not the Nile, of course, but enough water to, and of course, the illustration of him trying to go take a bath, and it was all bloody water, but enough water to convince Pharaoh that Moses and Aaron were just using some special magic. No, he would not listen to them, nor would he let Israel go. Then came the frogs, millions and millions of them. They swarmed all over Egypt. They jumped through the open doors and windows of people's homes until nobody knew what to do with them. They came into Pharaoh's palace, onto his bedroom, even to his bed. They got into his kitchen, into the ovens, and even into the dough that was being made into bread for him to eat. The Pharaoh simply could not get away from these frogs. He stopped, he stepped on them, sat on them, slept on them. He ordered his servants to kill them, but the more they killed, the more there seemed to be. There was no end of them. Egyptians had been swarmed with frogs before, but never a plague like this. They began to complain to Pharaoh, but he could do nothing to help them. At last, unable to stand it any longer, he sent for Moses and Aaron. Ask your God to take the frogs away, he said, and I will let the people go, but they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. When would you like when would you like the frogs to be gone? He asked Moses. Tomorrow, said the Pharaoh. Very well, and it shall be as you said, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. He promised that the frogs would leave the palace and the people's houses the next day, and remain in the river only. In making such a promise, Moses took a great risk, but he believed God would do as he had said, and it happened. In the morning, the frogs were all dead. They died out of the houses. They died out of the houses, out of the village, and out of the fields. The people gathered them in heaps, and the land stank. And I'm sure it did. But when the Pharaoh saw that the smell of the dead frogs knew that the plague was over, he changed his mind and refused to keep his part of the bargain. The Bible says he hardened his heart, which is a bad thing for anybody to do, and always leads to trouble. And the more trouble was on its way for the Pharaoh. Stretch out thy rod and smite the dust of the land, God said to Aaron, that it may become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And Aaron did so, and the dust became lice in men and beasts throughout all the land. That means there were lice in the palace also, on the Pharaoh's servant, his wife, his children, and on him himself. The magicians also turned into lice. His magicians also tortured with lice, tried to imitate what Moses had done, but failed. "This is the finger of God," they said. But though these men were beginning to see that there was a power at work in Egypt far greater than any they had ever known, Pharaoh was as obstinate as ever. Ooh, big words. Again, he hardened his heart. Next time Moses and Aaron met him, they brought more bad news. If he would not let the people of Israel go, they told him, then God will send a swarm of flies, and the house of the Egyptians shall be full of the swarm of flies. And then down at the bottom, the frogs. That's the frogs. And then we go here and read the next story. And it says, this time, however, a difference would be made between Egypt and the land of Goshen, where the Hebrews lived. God would make a barrier between them. There would be no flies there. Tomorrow shall this sign be, said Aaron. And in the morning the flies were there, myriads, myriads, myriads of flies, lots of flies. They got in people's eyes, in their clothes, in their food. There was no use in killing them, for more and more still came, till everyone was frantic. It was the same in the palace as in the homes of the humblest Egyptian. Throne rooms, banquet halls, and bedrooms were black with flies. At last the Pharaoh could not endure any more of it. He sent for Moses and Aaron. Go ye, he said, sacrifice to your God in the land. At last he was willing for the Hebrews to have time off for their sacrifice, but it must be in the land of Egypt. Moses didn't agree. No, he said, we want to go into the wilderness. All right, said Pharaoh, driven to desperation. Go if you must, anything so long as you can get rid of these flies. Only don't go very far away. At this, Moses promised to ask God to remove the flies, but as soon as he and Aaron were gone, the Pharaoh hardened his heart again. Yet again, neither would he let the people go. Moses and Aaron must have worried. What else would have to happen before this stubborn man would bow to the will of God? They didn't have to wait very long. They didn't have to wait long to find it out. And then as an illustration of people fighting flies. And it's a colored page. So it actually has it in the text. And that was part 2, story 4. And we'll get ready for the next one in a bit.